Hello and welcome to your Summit Action Session. It is day one of the Shared Space Summit. It is fantastic to be here with you live right now. We released our first 2 summit sessions to all of our summit registrants this morning. We have nearly 1,000 of you tuning in to the Shared Space Summit. This morning, you will have received to your inbox 2 sessions, Charles Vogel on the art of community and Rena Van Alst together with Gordon Streight on the smart way to add value to your property. Now, if you are registered for the summit and you haven't yet caught their sessions, check your inbox. Your special access link is there waiting for you. And if you didn't get that email and you're registered, let us know. Pop us a message here or send us an email, support@yourstrataproperty.com.au. The team is here. We have been all hands on deck since early this morning. It is Summit Week. We are ready to go. We have been resting. We have been eating our greens, as I've been telling everybody. We are here to help you. Any support, tech support, customer service that you need, do reach out to us. So we want to make sure if you're registered, you haven't missed the 2 summit sessions this morning. This live session now is all about putting into action these great lessons that our summit guests have been bringing us. Very shortly, I am going to bring in a couple of special guests, more special guests I have for you today. I'm going to introduce them very soon. I would love to hear from those of you who are here with us live, or even if you are watching this back later, what your key takeaways have been from the 2 sessions this morning, Charles and Rena together with Gordon. What ideas have you gained that you are taking back to your communities? This summit is not just about information, it is about action too. I want to make sure that you are left with some action steps. I am here as your summit mentor to help you with that, to answer your questions, to help brainstorm, if you need it, some ways for you to take action in your communities on these very important issues we're discussing here at the summit. Now, already I have heard from many of you who have watched the sessions. You've told me what you've loved about them. Some of you have already posted here on the page, which is awesome. We have heard from Anne. She's posted below saying that she loved the session from Charles Vogel, and in particular, the idea of having a welcome morning or afternoon, a tea or coffee session. Anne is in a community title community with 12 individual lots. So there's not a lot of coming and going, she says, but I think this would be a great way to get to know people and check out what their expectations are. Thank you so much for contributing your thoughts there, Anne. We also heard from Janie. Janie saying that she liked Charles on the art of the welcome. Something Charles talks about in his session. Often people make mistakes as they've not been welcomed properly. Yes, so true. I have to say that is my one of my big takeaways personally from Charles's session is all about the welcome. And I think it's something that I'm going to be putting in place in my community. We've talked about it as a committee. We haven't quite got there yet, but I can see how putting in that time, making that investment straight up can prevent problems down the track. So the welcome is definitely something that I think is a really key takeaway from Charles's session. I'm seeing a few of you come in now. It is great to see you. If you want to pop me a hello so I can see you there in the comments, that would be awesome. Hey, Grant. Grant saying insight, maintaining strategic value for all owners, not just a privileged few. I love that. And that would have come from Rena and Gordon's session, Grant. We are going to dig deep into that one too. Matthew, hello. It's been in the background while I work. Very interesting. Awesome. Fabulous way to enjoy the summit. Good to see you here, Matthew. I am seeing Megan saying the welcome seems like such a simple yet overlooked thing. Yeah. I think that's exactly what it is, Megan. So great to have those reminders there for us from our experts. Now, each morning during this week, Summit Week, we are going to put a post here on the Facebook page with a picture of the Summit guest experts whose sessions have been released that day And we will invite you to share your thoughts in the comments under that particular post. If you've got questions as well, that's a really good place to post them so that we can be ready to answer those in our 2 p.m. Summit Action Session. This is where we'll be, 2 p.m. live each afternoon. We are streaming both to Facebook and to LinkedIn. So those of you who are joining us on LinkedIn, special hello to you. Now, I will have each afternoon some special guests helping me out. And today I have for you two very special guests. One you may already be familiar with from earlier this morning. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Nikki Jovicic. I knew I was going to do it, Nikki. We practiced, but I had to do it. Nikki is the owner and director of LookUp Strata. LookUp Strata, if you don't already know it, you got to get into LookUp Strata, guys. LookUp Strata is Australia's top property blog dedicated to strata living. Nikki started it from scratch, but she built this site and launched it in March 2013. And since then, it has grown into a nationally recognized source of interesting and reliable strata information. She produces 3 strata newsletters each week for almost 10,000 subscribers. That is huge. Lot owners, managers, industry professionals from around Australia. Her newsletters are excellent. The many of you who are receiving those, I know, will attest to that. LookUp Strata has grown to 50,000 unique visitors who read well over 100,000 pages of strata information every month. It is a growing family business. Nikki's daughter Liza joined the team earlier this year and is helping Nikki to realize her mission of providing detailed, practical, easy to understand strata information to all Australians. It is a mission that I know well and I support. I am going to welcome in now Nikki Jovicic. I got it, Nikki. I got it. Here we go.
You did. Thank you so much, Amanda.
And I wrote it out phonetically and all of that. And we practiced and we've spoken before on the podcast and we've spoken live. It is wonderful to have you here with us today, sharing in the summit.
Thank you so much for the invite, Amanda. It's wonderful to be here.
And LookUp Strata is, of course, one of our very special summit supporters. You have been helping us to share the message of the summit and get the summit out to as many people as possible. You're one of the reasons why we are almost 1,000 people here joining in on the summit this week, which is awesome. Nikki, have you had a chance, busy lady that you are, to watch either of the sessions this morning?
I have. I spent this morning watching Charles's session and I thought it was fantastic. There's so much information in there. I took so many notes while I was watching it. And then I watched almost all of Gordon and Rena's session. So I just have the tiny bit to go back to at the end of, when we finished here today, I'll catch up on at the end of that. But also that was a wonderful session too. Very practical. I found the session that Rena and Gordon did, definitely.
Yes, there is certainly a lot in both of those sessions. I have watched most of the sessions many times over by this stage. So I get super excited every time I watch them back. And today I was again watching Charles in particular and going through some of my notes and trying to cull them down perhaps to 2 or 3 key takeaways. A little bit impossible. So I'm going to ask you to do that, Nikki. Do you want to give us your key takeaways from Charles's session?
I'd love to. And I was similar to you, Amanda. I made notes and your notes were about 4 or 5 pages long. So I've done the same thing. I've gone through and summarised that down a little bit too. I guess, the main thing that I took out of it, or one of the really main points, was the invitation. And we have lots of people coming in with writing questions in on the side about committees not being able to get people to become involved. And there were a few different ways that Charles spoke about that. But I think one of the really interesting ways was don't skip over the invite straight and go straight to an announcement. And I think a lot of committees tend to do that. They announce that they need more people to become involved, or they announce there's a meeting coming, but there's not that, not even a one-on-one, but a bit more of a personal or tailored invite to actually get people involved. And I know you're fantastic at tapping people on the shoulder, Amanda, which is one of the reasons that I actually be here today, because I'm certainly don't put myself forward for these types of things, but you do a really good job of that. And I think that could be something that could also be adopted into committees. And he also mentions things like finding out what gems you have within your community and making use of those those gems. And I think you had mentioned an example of setting up a subcommittee for renovations for a committee that was a little bit swamped down with renovations.
Yeah, definitely. That's always a very good example. I love too what Charles said about the difference between invitations and announcements. And he said, if you never make invitations, guess what? People don't accept them. So if you're thinking no one's putting up their hand and nobody's getting involved, have you invited them? And he says you might get lucky with your announcements. So understanding that difference, we're not demanding, we're not announcing, we're not saying this is what we're doing, and if you want to be involved, come and get involved. We're saying, hey, we've recognized that maybe you've got this particular special skill, you're a retired architect or an engineer or a designer or you're a lawyer, and we've got a subcommittee, and it'll be 4 hours over the month and these particular meetings, and being very clear about what you want that person to do and inviting them to contribute. That's the difference.
Definitely. But I think most of the topics or the things that Charles spoke about, it all comes back to really good communication, doesn't it?
Yes. Yep, definitely. And that's something that we talked about, communication and as well as community, two very important C words there. What else did you have on your list, Nikki, for your key takeaways?
One of the other things I really liked, and this wasn't really more a key takeaway, I guess it was in a way, but it was more he defined, or his definition of what community was, and I found that was a really great definition. And it was a group of people who share mutual concern for one another, and they don't dominate each other, but they care about the welfare of each other. So he acknowledges that there were differences within the community, but everyone had a common goal. And I think the thought of that would go a long way to solving a lot of issues that might occur within a community as well. And even something simple, well, it's not really simple, but something that we hear about a lot, especially on our side. We have lots of people writing in about problems with, say, resident parking problems. And I think if they sort of take a step back from that and acknowledge that the outcome for everyone is that they just want a safe place to park. So if they can look at that problem from that perspective, possibly they could use that perspective to help solve the issue a little bit differently than they might in other circumstances.
And that reminds me of what Charles had to say about trust and about how important building that groundwork. Trust is really the foundation of good relationships. How important it is to build that groundwork, build that trust before there's a crisis, so that when there is, and whether it's a global pandemic or whether it's a problem with the parking, when that issue arises, the leaders in the community, whether it's the committee or whether it's the strata manager, are able to make fast decisions, perhaps issue directives, perhaps make recommendations, do things, have those interventions. And that intervention is understood and accepted because we trust this person is making the right decision, because they have communicated to us over the past months or years that they're acting in our best interests. And we understand why they're taking these steps, because they want what's best for the community. Charles said that the time that we want to ask for help or to help understand things is not when they're spiraling out of control. That is not the best time.
Yeah, that came back to that first communication, and that should be the positive one. So you build the trust from that first communication, I guess, as well, and then start the conversation happening from a different perspective. If you've done the wrong thing or you've put the garbage in the wrong spot, so it's coming from a different perspective. And I like his example of taking the cookies around, and that's the first point of contact is something that's positive, and then you can grow from there. And I guess in those instances it becomes a little bit easier to have the hard conversations as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. No one wants their first conversation with their new neighbour to be, you put the rubbish in the wrong bin, or turn down the music, or stop renovating the bathroom, you need approval. It's nice to say hello and welcome first.
That's right. And then I also liked with that, because I noticed that there were a few comments about that, and you had mentioned about the welcome comment, and how he said that in really big buildings it's hard to make that welcome to everybody, but if you can divide the bigger buildings off into pods of people and have certain people look after different pods, and then you can manage those pods of people a little bit easier. So I don't know whether it's like dividing up the floors, like different floors, or coming to some arrangement as to how they do that.
Yeah, of course, that would be unique to each building. But how many buildings are even thinking about that or were thinking about that till they heard from Charles? I wouldn't think that there'd be too many. And often people do. I once heard, I think it was an architect who said that the ideal size for a building, a strata building, when you're talking about community, is about 40 lots, because it is small enough that you kind of have a feeling of who everybody is and where they are. If you're multi-story, then you've got just maybe 4 or 5 apartments at most on each level. But you're big enough that if there's a problem and you need to raise money, in particular, that's not a huge burden. Whereas if you were very small, then that might be more of a burden. But if you're in these buildings of 300 plus lots, then yes, you might feel overwhelmed by that task of welcoming in new people, understanding who everyone is and what they need. So having that that supervising person on the floor, or that representative, if you like, to wave the flag and direct their pod, I like that term, was a really, really good idea. I like that too.
So you would think maybe around about 40 lots per pod, or is that something that you would?
Who knows? I mean, it really would depend on the building, I suppose. Whether you are multi-story, whether you are a mix of commercial residential, whether you are maybe a large community association, you might have freestanding homes. That's going to be a little bit different, as Anne was saying in her post earlier. I think each community's got to work out what suits them. But just being inspired to start that conversation, I think, is number one. Yeah.
Being aware that that idea is out there. I really like that as well. So that were some of the ideas that I picked up from the talk this morning. And also the value. I think we'd spoken about the value of the people that do step forward, and realising that they do put lots of extra work into that, and that they're not equal to other people, and they need to be thanked for what they do and recognised for what they do and looked after.
Yes, and you'll those who have listened at the end of the interview, and I do this at the end of every summit interview, is give you my own, what I call my summit shift. And that's one thing that I've taken out of the interview personally that struck me as a different perspective, or something that I thought was absolute gold that I'm going to implement in my community, or recommend to my clients. And that was indeed my summit shift, relating to the strong core principle. And I'm really glad you raised that, Nikki, because I'm just seeing a comment come through now from Nicole, who is on LinkedIn. Hi, Nicole. Good to see you. She's saying, hi, Amanda and Nikki. Really enjoyed the interview with Charles. His perspective on the strong core was really important. So many times that strong core is seen negatively in strata, focus on committee turnover and not cherishing the hard work of so many committee members. And that was exactly how I delivered my summit shift, and how I felt this real shift of perspective. We do see this only a small percentage of people contributing to a community as a bad thing. And we think, why isn't there greater engagement? Why isn't there more representation? And we forget that those who are contributing are perhaps the best people to contribute, and they should be protected, and we should be privileging them and looking after them. Now, I appreciate this is a very fine line in strata, and this is often a bone of contention and a cause for concern when we have committees who maybe aren't in that trusted position, and are seen to be maybe abusing their power a bit. We need to be careful of that. But where we have a good, strong, functioning community with a strong core, that is not a bad thing.
Definitely. It's an interesting perspective. I think it could solve lots of issues out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, for sharing those with us. I'm just going to sneak back over to the comments I can see here to welcome in others who I can see are watching and saying hello. Elizabeth is here saying so many great takeaways. Yes. Ronald, also on LinkedIn. How are you? Good to see you. Milo is here saying, do you suggest paying the welcomers, or would that cause more fights than it's worth? Yeah. What do you think, Nikki? What if you had professional welcomers in the building?
Well, I guess if that's what the committee has decided to do and everybody's fine with that and nobody else wants to take up the role, I guess it's one way that you could look at it. I think maybe if that was the only option, then the long-term benefits from that might be worthwhile looking into that option. Yeah, and
well,
maybe
go ahead.
I was going to say maybe it could be a little bit more structured if that was the way that you decided to tackle that problem.
Yeah, indeed. And look, if you've got a professional building manager or on-site caretaker, someone who is really ideally placed to be doing that job, they are the contact with people who are coming into and out of the building, the new tenants, they're booking in the move-in, move-out dates. Then, of course, that person is a professional and is recompensed for their services. There may be out-of-pocket expenses that the leaders of our welcoming pods have if they're doing the cookies, if they're doing the packet of bylaws or community guidelines that they might be giving out, then definitely. Look, every community is different. And I think opening yourself up to these ideas, understanding that some communities are doing these things. I know one of the template bylaws that a lot of my members find helpful is the move in, move out bylaw, which has a whole process for connecting with that person, whether it's the strata manager, the building manager, a committee member on site. Landlords must give notice of when their tenants are coming in, when their tenants are moving out, so you can have that point of contact. A lot of buildings will say to me, Amanda, we just don't know when people are in and out. Well, make sure there is a documented procedure for how you might get to know, and a bylaw is often a good place to do that. Grant is saying concierge day-to-day welcomers need not be genuinely service-oriented and not just welcome in the click. Yes, fair enough. That's really important too, to be treating everybody on a level playing field. And Milo saying, I would see a welcome pack and someone to explain that body corporate managers are not property managers, and go over the more weird bylaws in place, plus some iced Vovos. I like it. I like you, Milo. These are good suggestions.
And possibly even you could schedule regular meet and greets as well for people that are coming into the building if you've got a larger community and there's quite a bit of turnover.
Yeah, definitely. And something that I asked Charles during the interview, because I felt, and you guys can tell me if you were thinking this, I tried to anticipate what some of your questions might be, knowing this isn't a great time for Charles to come on live. He's in California. And I asked him, what, Charles, would you say to people who say, we don't have time for this, Amanda. Sorry, this is Fantasyland. Might be nice in your community. It might be nice in Charles's community, but we just don't have time for it. And Charles said, well, if you don't put the time in, if you don't make that investment, then you're going to have problems down the track, and you're going to spend a disproportionate amount of time and money on solving those problems that could have been prevented if you put this process in place early on.
Definitely. It's a long-term benefit.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to be thinking about. Wonderful. Well, I am seeing a few more comments coming in here now. I will head back over there shortly. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, Nikki. It's always lovely to hear from you. You have such a fabulous, supportive, engaged audience there with LookUp Strata. I know a lot of them will be here tuning in as well. We will make sure that we put a link down here to your website so that anybody who hasn't heard of LookUp Strata before can definitely get themselves on your list and receive your thrice weekly e-newsletters and your monthly magazines that are coming out too. They're looking great.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Amanda. It's lovely, and I'll certainly be tuning in for the sessions for the rest of the week. And thank you so much for organising something like this. It's just really unique and it's fantastic.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Saying goodbye to Nikki there, and we are now going to welcome in our next special guest for this afternoon. Now, he is a man who is going to be familiar to many of you. Some of you will have seen him in his own summit session this morning. He is a strata owner, a committee member, a strata resident and investor, currently the chairman of 3 strata buildings and a strata representative to the country's largest community title scheme. His focus in residential strata is on improving livability and sustainability for all stakeholders through value-add projects that often involve technology. He is, of course, Gordon Streight. Here he is.
Amanda, thank you. Lovely to join you this afternoon.
Pleasure to have you here with us live and ready to roll yet again. You are a generous man.
Thank you. Well,
now, God,
it's nice to be able to share my experience and the knowledge that I've gained over 25 years in strata.
We are very privileged to have it. I was watching back, as I was saying to Nikki earlier, I've watched back a lot of the sessions numerous times over, and also making my own notes. And there was just so much in your session with Rena. We were talking about the smart way to add value to your property, whether that's your common property, your building as a whole, or your lot. And there's so much that we just really scratch the surface on. So those of you who are here tuning in, whether you're here live with us or whether you're watching this back later, if you do have more questions for Gordon to get stuck into, or that I can help you with as well on that adding value topic, please do feel free to post them here in the comments. But Gordon, have you had time whether to watch your session again or to check out Charles this morning?
Yes, in fact, I watched both of them. Charles said, it was interesting watching my own. I learned a couple of things.
Okay.
I need to smile a bit more because I look terribly serious at times.
It's a serious topic.
It is very serious. But the other thing, I didn't realize how often I blinked.
Oh, gosh. Oh, now I'm blinking.
That was really quite funny. Now, Charles' session was fantastic. He covered a lot of ground, and a really important topic for lots of buildings, because trying to build community can be a real challenge, and as he mentioned in there. And I know you've been asking Nikki about some of the things that I took away from it, and there's four, but really there's only three. One is to have a strong core, and have a strong core of people that really are passionate about the building and committed to the building. And that leads into the concept that he mentioned of the Pareto Principle.
Yes.
Now, I've been involved with business for all my life, and I understand the Pareto Principle applies to lots of things. 20% of the salespeople generate 80% of the sales, and 20% of your customers generate 80% of purchases, that sort of thing. But what I hadn't really appreciated was applying the same thing to strata. It never even occurred to me that was also the situation. And that's one of the reasons why the people that turn up to the AGM are the committee, or there's one or two other visitors that come in, or members that come in. But it's the flexibility of that ratio, I think, that was really important. When he talked about, maybe there's only 4% of people that are really committed, really part of that. So the Pareto Principle is a flexible kind of approach to things. And I thought that was a really profound way of looking at what we have often considered to be apathy in strata.
Yes.
And there's a different way to look at it. The other thing that I thought was really good was the concept of invitation versus an announcement.
Yep.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You really need to ask people to step up rather than just assume that they might.
Yep.
Yeah. And the third takeaway was the concept of a welcome to new people. Now, in one of my buildings, and I've got a copy of it here, we've developed a resident handbook. And this came about by the building manager being bombarded with, where do I find this? Where do I find that? How do I do this? How do I do that? Particularly in buildings where they're highly tenanted and there's a lot of turnover. Mm-hmm. So about 3 years ago, we decided to develop a little handbook, and it's evolved into several iterations. And now it's a 20-page full color A4 booklet that we give to every resident that comes in. We've handed them out to every owner. We've handed them out to all the estate agents that are involved in the building. It explains everything about what goes on in the building, right down to the dimensions of the lift car. So when you're moving in, you know how big things can be.
Perfect.
Across how, and really, in a sense, it came out of my involvement with a franchise group many years ago that emulated some of the things that Ansett Airlines did. Now, some of you viewers might remember Ansett Airlines collapsed 20 years ago, but they had a little booklet called How We Live Around Here. And it was just how we do things around the company across a whole range of things, soft topics, hard topics, finance. But it was really sort of a good introduction to how to be an employee in this organization. And so I've taken that sort of concept and applied it to this handbook, which looks like this.
Oh, thank you. That's excellent. And did you say it's about 30, 40 pages?
This one is 20 pages.
Okay,
and
great.
Since we published this about 18 months ago, we've got all sorts of ideas to extend it. It'll probably be about 30 pages when we finish.
Yeah.
So we're just in the sort of final stages now of doing the next version.
Yeah, I was thinking, because it's a project that we have on our list, as I said to Nikki, for our community here where I live. And I can see how something like that, you think, 2 pages, 10 pages, 30, 40. There's a lot once you start thinking about it.
And, it's the first version was just all text, and that's people just gloss over. So this has got photos and diagrams and charts and arrows and where to find things and how to do things and that sort of thing. So,
and it'll be so
eliminated lots of questions from the building manager.
Exactly. I was about to say it'd be so interesting to compare the before and after. Without this handbook, the building manager was spending this many hours answering these questions and now freed up to do the higher leverage, higher value stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And that leads me to your session, Gordon, because we only scratched the surface of this particular issue, which I thought was so powerful. With your commercial experience and your experience working with franchises, you talked about how important systems are and how if we have systems in place, we have procedures, we have checklists, how much easier our lives are. And it's another thing we might forget, like the Pareto Principle, which comes from the commercial world. Systems, processes, procedures, standard operating procedures, as you might call them in the office, apply in Strata as well. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that works in your communities day to day?
Yes, really good point, Amanda. Strata is a very repeatable kind of activity. People are moving in and out, move in and out. There's contractors coming and going regularly. There's service agreements that occur monthly, quarterly, half yearly, etc. All of those are processes that get repeated often and over and over. What happens between one visit and the next is we sometimes forget the bits and pieces that are required for this particular activity or this contractor.
Yep.
Because if we don't have a checklist for it or a process for doing it, something gets left off the list and doesn't get done. And the next time it might be a variation of that. We do the things that we missed last time, but forget something else.
Yeah.
So having procedures and checklists for things just makes life easier because you don't have to keep remembering how to do stuff. And that's and if you're doing something every day, then it just becomes part of what you're doing. But if it's periodic or very irregular, then you'd have to keep reinventing the wheel each time you do something, or have to go through an activity. And having a document that explains what's going on, the checklists just eliminates that variability of activity.
And the joy of iteration, which I think is something that we forget to teach our young people, and we don't necessarily learn as a fact at school or at university, but you certainly learn in life. The more you do something, the better you get at it, and the more you can refine. And procedures and systems are the best way to do that.
That's right. And then it's very easy also to pass that on to the next generation of committee or the next chairman or whoever, chairperson. Again, it's this is how we operate around here. And it's just easy to keep the ball rolling as committees evolve and change and people come and go.
Yeah. Now I'm seeing a great comment here from Colin. Gordon, you spoke on data being king. And I reflected on Rena, who spoke about minutes, but a building is built around lots. How do minutes flesh out to lots? Data keeping. I'm not sure if I'm following that completely, Colin, but I do want to get into that with Gordon, because data is probably, again, a concept that we don't apply so much to Strata, but I could see the way you explained it in the session, Gordon, really made clear how important it is to collect that data and the connection there to minutes as well, which is a real big part of our data keeping exercise.
It is, yes. Minutes are key long term. In the short term, people remember what happens last meeting generally, or the meeting before, but you go back 3 or 4 years or 10 years, and unless things are documented, then you lose the history of why things were done. Minutes don't need to be a verbatim of the conversations, but they do need to in the gist and the substance of what happened and decisions that were made and why some decisions were made. And then data is really just a key way of helping you make decisions. We don't go and buy something that's quite expensive just by walking up to the store and saying, I'll have the first one on the shelf. We've analyzed the specifications or how it fits our needs or how it fits our lifestyle, etc. So having information about anything that we're doing is part of decision-making process. And in Strata, a lot of that is that sort of data is hard to come by, I must admit. In a technical sense, there's lots of ways of collecting it. More of the online portals that buildings are using, such as My Boss or Building Link and others, are very successful in gathering that sort of data from which to build decision-making processes.
Mm-hmm.
But having hard data on how the building runs and frequency of people coming in and out of the door, or how frequently the garage door is opening, or how many hours a particular pump or air conditioning system is running, is key to then understanding how to make decisions for improving or replacement or upgrading facilities. So data is really important.
And it is something that we definitely get into in an upcoming summit session with Ethan Burns, when we're talking about improving sustainability in your apartment buildings, getting started with a sustainability project. And I don't want to give too much away because it's another great session to tune into, but he does talk about starting with an Excel spreadsheet and collecting that data.
As simple as that. Yes.
Yeah.
And Excel is very powerful for doing all sorts of things.
Yeah. And what I loved about what you said, Gordon, is that if you have the data that you have collected when you're trying to tell a story about a project, and storytelling was another really important feature for our committees to focus on, when you are sharing why we're doing something, how it's going to play out, what it's going to look like in the end, and then having your two sets of data. If we do it, we're going to be in this position. If we don't do it, fine, we won't spend the money, we won't go through that process, but we're going to be in this position. And that could be as simple as our properties will be worth this much when we do it, our properties will be worth that much if we don't do it. And that's the bit, I think you even said in your session yourself, Gordon, that's the bit that if you miss and you've had that experience of, oops, I didn't quite get the data right, I didn't tell the story, the project didn't get up.
Yes, yeah. And understanding where you are requires data, and understanding where you want to be requires the same data.
Yep. Yeah.
In many cases, and so that's the starting point for anything that I'm involved in, is understand. And sometimes it's minimal, sometimes it's anecdotal, sometimes it's just absolutely hard numbers based out of measuring devices and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But any of that then works towards helping you make decisions and present information and then tell a story about why to do you wanting to do something or not.
Mm. And touching on something, Gordon, that I think you only got to briefly in the end of your session, but was really powerful for me, I've seen how this works in my own community, was that you talked about the importance of doing the small visible things, getting the gardens in order, doing the paint work, getting the doors looking great. It doesn't have to be solar panels. It doesn't have to be balconies. It doesn't have to be the multi-million-dollar renovation that's going to take 5 years. That can be very frustrating for owners, and they can't see where their money's going. Reminding ourselves that doing the small stuff is important. I really like that, and I think we need that reminder in our communities.
We do, because everybody's paying levies, and often they don't know where that goes. And I know there's comments around the strata world that it just all goes into the strata manager's pocket. And that's obviously not the case, because it needs to keep the lights running and water flowing, etc.
Yep.
But it's visible changes that give people a sense that something's happening. And I think that's key to having a successful building that has a sense of things happening and going places and improving. Even as I mentioned in the podcast, just painting doors and door frames made a big difference. One of my buildings, we're now painting all of the fire stair doors red, just so that it's clear that that's where the fire door is. And again,
sounds like a good plan.
And it's, there's 50 doors, simple to do. It just makes a big difference visually, but it also says that things are happening.
Especially when there are other things going on that might not be so visible. So the example I'm thinking of is in a community where there may be litigation going on, and people see that there's a lot of money, maybe a special levy or two is being raised to fund litigation. Either the owners corporation is taking some action, or there is action being taken against the owners corporation. And the committee is preoccupied with that. It is burdensome, it is expensive, but it is unavoidable. And it's something that the owners corporation is kind of stuck with for a period of time. I have seen a community gain an unimagined level of support for completely unrelated litigation when they spent $2,000 then doing up the front garden because the owners said, oh, wow, this committee is fabulous. They've got this Supreme Court litigation happening and they've been able to sort out the garden. Isn't that wonderful? And the committee thought, all we did was just tell the gardener to do the job, the quote that we accepted. That was easy.
Yes, yes. And funny, even in our own lives, it's the little things that can make a difference.
Yeah.
So just translating that straight through to a strata property is very similar.
Yeah. There are some comments here I can see from Grant saying the Strata Committee needs to present the transparent value proposition for each and every project, including the pros and cons options. Yes. And I think, Grant, then we're coming back to Charles Vogel's point in his session about trust, right? That's how our committee members are building trust because they're being open, they're being transparent. Something that we haven't yet touched on, which I had in my notes from Charles' session, was this concept of being vulnerable. And Charles said, big topic, really hard to get into in detail, but so, so important that as human beings, we want to connect and relate to other human beings who show their true selves, who are vulnerable, who say, you know what, maybe this time we didn't get it exactly right. Or there was a time a couple of years ago that we went through this awful situation with this particular owner and we really stuffed it up, but we learned from that and we're better at that now. We know what to avoid in the future. And that is a place from which you build trust. And as humans, we respect other humans who bring that to the table. And I see that there where committees are being open and honest. These are the bad things that could happen. These are the good things.
Yes, yes. And like in all parts of our life, trust is an important part of that. In one of the buildings that I've been involved in for 20 years, we started off with just little projects at the very beginning, spending capital works type projects back in the day when it was called sinking fund. But little projects progressively that made a difference to the building in small ways. And over time, we were able to escalate that to very significant projects that we needed to do along the way. And we had ultimately, we ended up with no pushback from owners because we had built that level of trust in doing things, carefully managing, finances were in order. There was no surprises. And then when we needed to do those big projects, we had great support from people and, general meetings would turn up and it was just the committee voting on it.
That's it.
But that was a long-term project to build trust, and trust, as we know, can be fractured very quickly. So it's something that has to be, garnered and carefully nurtured along the way all the time.
There's a comment here from Colin. He's saying, we traced the footprint of a person from the outside of the building to their room and then to the rooftop. That's really interesting, Colin. Was that in order to assess their experience of the common area and make sure that they were getting the best experience possible? Is that something you've done, Gordon?
To follow people like that?
Just working out where they're moving through the building and then what are they seeing? What are they experiencing? Are there hazards? Is there room for improvement? This is how someone lives day to day and really applying our empathy that way.
Yes, yes. I think I mentioned in our podcast earlier that having come from a retail background where you need to walk outside the store and come back in with customer eyes on, and look at what the customer sees. Take the owner's hat off and put a customer's hat on, and then look around and see what the customer sees, see what a resident sees. And I think many people would be surprised when they look critically at their building from a resident's perspective, all the little things that pop up. Yeah. Things on the wall, things that need painting, light bulbs that are out, whatever it might be. And so that's walking around, management by walking around, in a sense, is what it is just seeing what's there. But the other thing, I know there's a university in the States that I'm not sure how long ago it was built. Let's say it's 20 years ago, and they didn't build any concrete paths at all in the whole complex. And they just waited until the ant tracks developed, where people did the shortcuts, moved around between buildings, through gardens and rest of it. And then 3 years later, actually built the paths.
Right.
The paths that people used.
Yes.
Instead of having built paths and then find people use shortcuts around it. So sometimes you have to just watch and see what happens before you take some steps.
Yeah, it reminds me of drawing up procedures and systems, if we come back to that in business. One way that we're recommended or taught to do that sometimes is that you record everything that you do. in your day, right? So from that, I get up, I open my computer, I check my emails, then I talk to my assistant, then I go get a coffee, that whatever it is. You write it all down, and then you sit there after a week or two of collecting that data. We're back at data, collecting that data, and then work out, okay, what do I just not need to do at all? What in this list is a complete waste of time? Get rid of that. What can I delegate to other people? Put a system in place to delegate that. What's left that I absolutely have to do? And then how do I do that most efficiently? And this is back to the paths. You know, this is the way that people use this area. So let's build a path to make it easier for them. Taking a breath, stopping, collecting the data. This is all stuff that once we start thinking about it, and I haven't done this before as well, it's so exciting, this shift that this summit brings, applying it to Strata, it's stuff that we know and understand, and it works in other spaces. So why shouldn't it work here?
Yes. Many of us come from commercial backgrounds or teaching backgrounds where all of these systems and processes and approaches to activity are common. We just take them as part of what we do in those environments, and yet we don't bring them automatically into Strata. I think we can. There's lots of things that we can in that way.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gordon, for being here live with us this afternoon. If anyone has not yet caught Gordon's session with Rena Van Alst, do make sure you get stuck into that one. It will be over in your inbox if you are registered to join us at the summit. Gordon, did you have any other sessions on your list for this week? Was there someone there who's jumping out to you that you really want to make sure you catch?
To be honest, haven't had a chance to catch up with all of it yet. Life in the computer software world is very busy at the moment, but certainly I plan to watch all the rest of the sessions because I learned so much from Charles this morning. That was fantastic.
Yeah, there are some great sessions coming up. You'll definitely want to catch Ethan Burns. He's right up your alley with the sustainability, infrastructure, and all of that that's going on in our space at the moment. I'm really looking forward to bringing everybody our New South Wales Building Commissioner, David Chandler, also Kat Carmichael, past president of the Community Associations Institute in the US, another US special guest, seeing how they're doing things over there, particularly in the face of the pandemic. There's just so much. I've had a little bit of insight because obviously I have interviewed these guests, and I have already watched some of these interviews that we're gradually bringing you over this week. So super excited to be here chatting about those as well later this afternoon. I'm going to let you go now, Gordon, and I will wrap us on up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me to participate. Bye for now.
Pleasure. All right. Well, you have heard from Nikki Jovicic. There we go, Nikki. Second time right too. I'm on a roll. And Gordon Streight, our special guest. Thank you so much to both of them for joining us here today. We are moving on up towards 1,000 people registered for this summit, the largest gathering of strata property owners online the world has ever seen. I really would love to reach this goal. If you have friends, clients, colleagues, neighbors who need to know about this summit, then please do. Tell them to head on over to yourstrataproperty.com.au/summit to get registered. That is the only way that you can access the summit sessions all throughout this week. We are releasing 2 sessions each morning. So if you are registered, you will get a link to the next 2 sessions in your inbox. They are released at 8 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. If you are registered and you're not getting those emails, please do reach out to us. And I am here too all week as your summit mentor. I am here to answer your questions. I'm doing that here in our summit action sessions. So if you have questions arising from the sessions, please do pop them here on the Facebook page. We will put a guest headshot on the page so you can follow along, you know where we're up to, and pop your questions and your comments. I'd love to hear what your action steps are, what your key takeaways are from each session. So get ready, guys. Get ready. Plan your next session. We are here until Friday. It is full on. I'm seeing some comments there, some thank yous for Gordon. Thank you, Nikki. Also thanking Gordon. And I will be here tomorrow 2 p.m. with more special guests for you. Some community, some neighbors, some people who are just like you, who are tuning into the summit, who are taking these lessons back to their communities, going to share with you exactly what steps they're taking. Have a restful afternoon. Get a good night's sleep. Get ready for our next summit sessions. I will see you here tomorrow.